I was interested in something you told me. We were getting some political reaction from Canada in relation to travel, and you said you were getting messages at Matador. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our newsletter person, she sends me some of the comments that people will respond to our newsletters. Right now we have, if you unsubscribe, it asks you why. And, it's an elective if you want to fill it out. And we've been getting a slew of unsubscriptions from Canadian readers that are like, we will no longer read U.S. media. We will no longer travel to the U.S. You support the Trump administration.
Wait, so they unsubscribed to Matador because of the politics?
Yeah.
But Matador is about travel.
I know. But I think it's the U.S. travel. We've gotten, and I sent you some of the other data that's showing that Canadians in particular are canceling or avoiding traveling to the U.S. right now. I think there's just this whole kind of outburst.
Wake and Wander, Episode 7. My guest today is Tim Wenger. This episode was recorded in Palisade, Colorado. Tim is a senior editor over at Matador Network. They cover all things travel. And he joins me today for a wide-ranging discussion about different topics happening in the travel industry. The airplane crashes. What's going on with that? Canada boycotting travel to the U.S. I asked Tim, is there anywhere in the world he wouldn't travel because of politics? I share my own list as well. We're also going to get into some of Tim's specialty surrounding sustainability, automated cars changing the travel industry, new hotels claiming to be sustainable. Are they? Or is it just greenwashing? And how about the media punishing the everyday traveler for their carbon footprint? Is this right? Should we feel guilty for traveling? We'll get into that and also share some stories about being bribed in Mexico. This podcast will be talking travel, talking to guests from all over the world. Here's episode 7.
Check mic left, check.
Nice. Oh, that sounds better.
All right, here we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Give me one more.
Check mic left, check. That was my check when I was playing music. Every time.
That's actually what you did?
Yeah, every time on stage.
Say it again.
Check mic left, check. Check mic left, check. Then sometimes I turn it into a little more of a rap, like check mic left, check. Check mic left, check. Check mic left, check mic left, check. And then I'd kind of fuck it up like that. After like
what did your bandmates think of this?
I don't know. Being in a punk band is perpetually ridiculous, so it's always just a bunch of nonsense. That was minor play right there.
Do you miss it?
I miss aspects of it. I miss playing good shows. I miss the camaraderie between bands when you're on the road. There's nothing like being in a random town at a random crappy bar with another band that's going through the same struggles and the same dreams as you. I've never been able to find relationships like that anywhere else. And it's funny because then when you're back home in the practice space, you're talking shit about all the other bands, about how you're better and yada yada yada. But when it's face-to-face interactions, it's the best. You're the best of friends.
So that competition comes out a little bit when you're back practicing.
Yeah. 'Cause it's jealousy is what it is. You see the things that they're doing that you should be doing, and you're like, oh, and then you get all insecure. So you start like finding reasons that your band is better. You should be the one that are getting these big gigs.
This sounds applicable to a lot of places in life, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
I feel
everything.
like I do this in writing.
Yeah.
Like when you're on a trip and meet other writers, it's like quick bonding, been the best friends forever for 5 days.
Yeah.
And then you get home and you're like, well, they were cool, but my career's doing it in a better spot.
I mean, that's how we met. We met in an airport. Actually, we met in an Uber.
That's right.
I know we talked about this before, but yeah.
Well, that was I was thinking today, man, I think we did our first podcast 2 years ago, but do you remember I didn't turn the mics on? So we did the whole podcast and it was useless.
Yeah, well, I think in part of it too was we were sitting in the open room in that co-working space and there was a bunch of noise, like there were other people. Right?
There was, yeah. But
somebody showed up like halfway through and started talking or something.
Correct, but the mics we're wearing now on our heads, they were deactivated, and it was only picking up on the computer, which right now, we're not sitting close to. So it really picked us up very faint, and then, all the guys that were coming in and out.
Yeah.
So cheers to not doing that again.
Yeah, this is much better. This is a nice little setup you've got, honestly.
Thanks,
it's
man.
Not bad.
Well, I'm curious, obviously, to get into the writing and stuff, and we can talk about whatever you want, but I think your backstory is really interesting, what you just shared about being in a punk band and traveling. It seems like that was your first introduction to traveling.
In a lot of ways it was. I mean, when I was growing up, we'd do a family vacation every year or whatever, but that was standard stuff. My first forays into adventure travel certainly were snowboard trips and touring with a punk band.
And you were based out of Denver at that point?
Durango first and then Denver. Yeah, we started in the town I went to college in. And we came up pretty quick in that town. Obviously, it's a small town. There's not a lot of bands. So we pretty quickly became, a staple on the local gig circuit, and were able to start getting opening slots when bigger bands would come through that were ska or punk rock, which isn't super common in college towns, but it happened. And so we gigged a lot repeatedly and started, getting our set down, and we had our songs down, and, we had some music on CDs. So we had our stuff down and started coming to Denver, and we started going to other towns around Colorado, Grand Junction, Pueblo, Colorado Springs. So we just kind of built this little circuit around the state, and we started going to Utah and Arizona. We became good friends with a band from Arizona called the Braskies that basically, they'd bring us down, we'd bring them up to Colorado and play shows with each other. And they were probably our best example of what I was just talking about as far as being good friends with these guys that you see once a year, maybe twice a year. But when you see them, it's like no time has passed because you're going through the exact same thing in your life, where you're trying to make this band work while everybody in the group is also trying to make their personal lives work and their relationships and their jobs, and it's just a total shit show, and it's almost impossible to do. And, you hear with like huge rock stars, all these guys that have been together forever, they hate each other and they fight all the time. And like, it's the same way with small local bands and small time touring bands, because a band is basically a marriage between four guys, and you're dealing not only with them, you're dealing with their partners, and you're dealing with their jobs, and they're dealing with yours. So you have to find that balance between not hating them and working with them, and they have to do the same with you, because everybody has quirks that drive other people nuts. And when you're on the road in a van, there's no privacy at all. You're literally with these guys 24 hours a day. You're like literally going into the bathroom at gas stations to like poop, and that's your 10 minutes by yourself for the day. So
were you guys sleeping in the van too?
Sometimes, usually it's floors, or now and then you'd get a venue that'll pay for you to get a hotel, or we'd get paid enough to buy a hotel room. But yeah, it's a lot of sleeping on people's floors.
It's crazy you mentioned all the other stuff in the life. I did an interview today. I went to St. Pete a couple weekends ago, and just happened to meet this guy there, a friend of a friend. His name is Chris. He's in the Hip Abduction. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're a reggae band. You only listen to punk, so you probably have never heard of them. But
okay,
they're like a good reggae band from St. Pete. They're touring right now with some other reggae bands, whatever. Anyway, I got his contact and was able to interview him for the story, which was neat. But he was telling me just in our conversation how he's still a full-time teacher in St. Pete.
Yeah.
He's able to work remote because he manages the online component of the school. But, for example, he teaches the history of ideas still. He's a philosophy teacher. But they're playing Red Rocks for the 4th time this summer.
Wow.
And I was blown away because, like a lot of things in our culture, you look up to these people that are successful and you figure, oh, well, something must have just gone right for them, right? They're not like me. They had some lucky path or whatever. And here's this guy playing in this very successful band, playing at these iconic venues. And this morning, before talking to an idiot like me, he was checking email for this intro philosophy class he teaches. Yeah. And then tonight he's playing, I forget the venue, but someplace, I guess Bruce Springsteen became famous. It's just wild. Like, you don't even realize these people have these things in their lives.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's, you asked what I miss about playing music. What I don't miss is the constant hustle. The thing with the music industry, I mean, I like hustling, but the problem with the music industry is that there is absolutely no money until you get to the top. The venues don't have any money. The bands sure as hell don't have any money. The promoters don't have any money. The press doesn't have any money. There's absolutely no money. It's almost like a barter system where okay, we're going to bring 30 people through the door and we're going to make $3 a head off of those 30 people. So our band of 4 guys is going to make $90 tonight, and maybe we'll sell some T-shirts. So we might walk out of the club with $200 or $300. to buy a tank of gas in the van, buy food, maybe get a hotel room. Like there's literally no take-home pay until you get to the point where you're getting like a $5,000 a night guarantee, and that's the top 1% of bands that ever make it to that level.
So did that lack of money make it easy for you to transition into being a writer?
Well, yeah, actually it's funny. You know, I would attribute my ability to freelance and to build a career as a self-employed contractor directly to playing in a band for 10 years, because it taught me. It's so funny. You think punk is like this anti-establishment thing, and it is in a lot of ways, but it taught me how to hustle. It taught me how to run a business, and it taught me that when I put myself out there and take calculated risks, I can make things happen for myself. And that absolutely is the only reason that I'm able to do what I do for a living now.
Aren't you glad you didn't become a political journalist?
Very glad. Yeah. Very glad.
Dude, it's so insane just following some of this news and looking at it from the idea of covering the news. Politics aside, last year covering the Biden administration, pretty slow moving, not a lot going on, whatever. Warp speed, January, February this year.
Yeah.
I look at some of these White House correspondents like Caitlin Collins from CNN. She just got appointed to that. And last year I was like, oh, that's great for her. And now I see her already. I'm like, good God, how is she going to survive these 4 years? Just constantly there, constant reporting, just all day, 24/7. I just can't even really, I couldn't imagine.
I just, the thing that would get me about that is that, like, right now I can't even, like, read the headlines on the New York Times without feeling my heart rate elevating immediately. I can't imagine working in that world and, like, knowing not only, first of all, that you have to deal with this all the time, but second of all, that you are the one that is responsible for making all of these heartbeats rise all over the world when people read your work. Like, that would be a lot to deal with emotionally.
I think political is the hardest thing to remain objective. When you're a travel writer, you're in finance, it's really easy to be a journalist of objectivity and reason.
Yeah.
But you get into politics, which have these really like heartbeat issues.
Yeah.
It's a great way to put it.
And I mean, I have a lot of respect for the people doing that, most of them at least. I think there's probably some people that are in it for the wrong reasons, but I would never want to do that.
I could never do it, I don't think. It would just be too... I learned that in grad school, covering crime and politics. It's interesting. I'm interested in politics, but to be ingrained in it day after day, it would just be too exhausting.
Yeah.
And you have to report on a lot of things that are wait and see, but today's media is so reactionary. They want people that react to it. They want that commentary about it, and it's hard to sit there and say, okay, well, I don't really know what's going to happen with the tariffs. That's not a fun story.
Right.
That's not going to.
And it's funny. The other my other editing contract outside of Matador is with a finance site called Money Digest, and we have been covering the tariffs extensively. We're not original. We don't have an original reporter in D.C. reporting this. We're basically just covering it second day style. But even editing these stories that are pretty low impact, we're not the go-to breaking news. We're not being controversial about it at all. We're just kind of outlining how this might play out for businesses and consumers. It's almost too much even in that sense. It's just a crazy thing to deal with. And I have a bit of a hot take that I would put out regarding the reactionary element of it all. It is very reactionary. Even the big legacy outlets are incredibly reactionary with their headlines right now. And, I hear people want to blame the media for problems or say the quote unquote media is the problem. I would say that yes, the media is part of the problem, but most of these outlets, including the big ones, they're trying to do what they need to do to survive, because 97% of digital advertising revenue is eaten up by Amazon, Google, and Meta. So that's leaving everybody from the New York Times down to lowly blogger over here in left field fighting over 3% of the pie. And these publications, maybe they're not taking the right path. In a lot of ways they're not, but they got to do what they got to do to get eyes on the page so that they can sell ads.
I don't know what the answer is.
I don't know what the answer is either.
Nobody does, obviously, because of the digital landscape has changed it so much. I was interested in something you told me you were talking about this morning about we were getting some political reaction from Canada in relation to travel, and you said you were getting messages at Matador. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our newsletter person, Kelsey, who's become a good friend of mine, she sends me some of the comments that people will respond to our newsletters. Right now we have, if you unsubscribe, it asks you why. And, it's an elective if you want to fill it out. And we've been getting a slew of unsubscriptions from Canadian readers that are like, we will no longer read U.S. media. We will no longer travel to the U.S. You support the Trump administration. And I was talking to my friend, a friend who's from Quebec last week, and he was saying that Canadians, himself included, just feel like they've been stabbed in the back by their best friend, basically. Like America has just, turned around and started bad-mouthing them.
I can understand it. Wait, so they unsubscribed to Matador because of the politics?
Yeah.
But Matador is about travel.
I know. But I think it's the U.S. travel. We've gotten, and I sent you some of the other data that's showing that Canadians in particular are canceling or avoiding traveling to the U.S. right now. I think there's just this whole kind of outburst.
Do you think this is the same as if Trump wins, I'm going to move to Canada, all the celebrities that never did? Or
I think it's more founded than that because they're actually on the receiving end of a lot of his bullshit right now.
No, I know. Not that. I mean, just like, do you think they're going to follow through? Do you think these
I don't know.
Are like reactionary people who are just like, venting? Or do you think that Canadians over the next 4 years are going to boycott the U.S. in some way?
I can't imagine it would be entirely because the economies are very intertwined. But I did spend 2 weeks in BC in January, and I will say that there is a strong buy Canadian movement going on right now. There are in stores labels of products that are made in Canada versus products made in the U.S., encouraging people to buy the Canadian product. And there's like a boycott the U.S. movement going on as far as how they shop.
Wow, it's interesting because hearing that, when you first said it, I'm like, that's great. Everyone should be buying local products. That's a wonderful thing. Shipping crap all over the world is one of our biggest problems of sustainability, which we'll talk about later with travel. But then when you add the end in where it's like boycott, right? It's just a little bit different.
Yeah, it adds a little bit more of a punch to it, right?
Yeah. I always wonder about this. So when you told me, I was thinking, are there any countries in the world that I would not travel to because of politics? And you think about it, there's a lot of countries out there that don't treat women that well. Mm-hmm. They don't treat gay and alternative lifestyles that well. They don't have a great human rights history. But I've been to China. I've been to the Middle East. Yeah. I travel to these countries. I was trying to think of a country that I wouldn't travel to. And I think just as a traveler, even if it was horrible, like North Korea, I know a travel writer that went there. And it sounded really interesting, even though it's so like kind of a fucked up place. What do you think?
So I wouldn't specifically avoid a place because of politics. I one of my most deeply held beliefs that has been ingrained very deeply as a editor at a travel publication is that you should never judge a people by their government. And I think that holds true even in democracies with elected governments. I think it's very true in places like with autocracies, but even in a democracy, I don't think it's fair to hold a government's actions against its people. And in that sense, I wouldn't point out a single country that I wouldn't go to, but I would call to mind right now that Saudi Arabia is having a huge travel push. In fact, there have been a ton of travel media, including people from Matador, going to Saudi Arabia over the last 3 years, because the country is making a concerted effort to diversify its economy away from oil and gas and towards other things, tourism being a big push there. And regardless of what you think of MBS, obviously the Khashoggi situation and all of he's been involved in a lot of bullshit, and I wouldn't vouch for him, and these statements are in no way an acceptance of the Saudi government or any of their actions. But everyone I've spoken to that has been there has had nothing but positive things to say about the Saudis, and especially the young Saudis, and how excited they are to see their country open up to the world and become more a part of the global movement, and to see some progress going on. Because a place like that with a very oppressive monarchy, progress happens very, very, very slow, if at all. And the rate of progress that they've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, obviously many of these things, such as women being able to drive, are things that much of the rest of the world saw a long time ago. They're leagues beyond. But for them, it's a huge deal. And honestly, that should be embraced.
I guess I'm just confused because when I hear something like these Canadian travelers say they're not going to come to the U.S., I don't look at me traveling as supporting the country I'm visiting. I look at it as I'm enriching myself. I'm going to that country to learn something about that country for me, or to have an experience for me, or to enrich myself by the experience I'm going to have. Of course, by going to that country, you support its economy in a small way or at an individual level. I did read that article you said about how even the Canadian Association of Tour Operators was sort of, they weren't calling for a boycott, but kind of were.
I think they're worried more than anything else. They're just expressing concern, which is all they can do right now. Yes, I do think that unsubscribing to the email newsletter of a travel publication is just an impulsive, reactive thing that makes you feel better in the moment. I don't think anybody should look too deeply into that. But I don't know. I guess with Canada, I understand the frustration. I honestly feel it too. I was really happy to see Canada beat the U.S. in the hockey tournament.
You were?
Yes. Because it's their game. It's their, like, it had to have felt so good. It must have been such a relief to win that game for them, like such a relief of pressure. Can you imagine being in their situation and losing to the U.S. in a game that is nowhere near the top of mind for the majority of Americans?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been painful. I definitely could see that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not anti-U.S. in any way. I'm not I'm not going to jump on that board. But given just the news cycle and everything that's happened with Canada, and just it seems a little bit piling on, and had they have lost the game, I could see how that would have been pretty tough. They did boo our national anthem, so, that's not great. When you went to Canada in January, how did people treat you?
Perfectly fine.
So it was fine. So on the individual level, what were you doing there?
I was on a Powder Highway press trip first, and then I was at a conference in Victoria the second week.
Tell us about the Powder Highway.
Oh, it's amazing, man. I'd been wanting to go there for years. It's funny, like Revelstoke is one of the better known Canadian ski resorts. I wouldn't say it's at the level of Whistler, but it's pretty established. It's new. It's only about, I think it opened in 2008 or 7. So as far as ski resorts go, it's new, but they have done a good job of branding and marketing. It's a very established resort in a great mountain town. But still going there and knowing that it's one of the more well-known resorts in BC, it's a completely different experience than going to Vail or Breck. I don't think I waited in any lines. The slopes are wide open. They're not crowded. After Revelstoke, we went to Golden and did a heli day with CMH heliskiing, and then did a day at Kicking Horse, which is my new favorite ski resort. Excellent terrain, very steep, very challenging. You can literally get, right as I said in my article, you can get into the shit right off the gondola. You don't have to take multiple lifts to get into a run that has your heart pounding. You can just get right there. Double Black Diamonds, first run of the day.
I think most people that fly into Calgary usually go to Banff, right? So like Sunshine, Norquay,
yep.
Lake Louise.
So we drove by a lot of that stuff going back to the airport. But so yeah, this is all a little bit more remote than Banff or Whistler, which is near Vancouver. But still, like, established resorts, lodging at the base, not huge, not blown out, but they know what they're doing. It's not a tiny little ski hill, neither of them.
Tell us about heliskiing. It's something I've always been curious about doing. In my mind, it's always been something where you better have your shit together. You better be a really good skier or snowboarder. You're literally being dropped off on the top of a mountain from a helicopter. Is that the correct perception? What was the experience like?
That isn't really the correct perception. You do need to be at least, an upper intermediate level skier. And I think most of the people that go heli skiing are probably above that level because it's not a cheap investment. It's not something that a 1 or 2 time a year skier is probably going to pay for.
How much does it cost?
A couple $1,000s a day.
$1,000 a day.
Yeah.
But you get multiple runs?
Yeah. So the way it works in my experiences, and I've done a few different heli outfits at this point, but this CMH out of Golden at the Purcell Lodge, they only operate day trips. So we showed up about 7 a.m. They give you a tutorial video on backcountry skiing. Then you go outside and you do a beacon rescue practice. And then you kind of get a walkthrough of the heli. And then you go. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. We had a skier in our group that was probably an intermediate skier, does well at the resorts, but this person was pretty petrified before the day started. And I could see it in her face, and we had talked about it at dinner the night before. And once she got out of the helicopter the first time and did a run and experienced how guided it is and how, it's very different from a ski resort experience, but it's also not a true backcountry experience where you're just out there in the elements. The runs are predetermined. The guides and helicopter pilot they know when you leave in the morning where they're going based on the conditions, based on the weather, based on the ability of the group. All of that is predetermined. They're not just dropping you on a peak and saying we'll see you at the bottom. It's all very controlled. The heli terrain is marked with landings at the top and bottom of the runs for the helicopter, and the guide will ski out in front of the group, usually stop halfway down the run or so, let everybody catch up, and then you go. You're always skiing one at a time because you're in the backcountry, and that's the best practice, in case there's a slide. So it's very organized and it's very orchestrated. Of course, accidents happen as they do anytime you're in the backcountry. You're in avalanche terrain. Accidents can happen, but they're very likely not going to be putting you in a situation where something could go wrong beyond what can already go wrong anytime you strap into a pair of skis.
I think we always see the video where it's like the last second where some skier is on a tiny, tiny ledge that their skis can barely fit on, and then they go down this terrain that's basically a straight line down. But you're saying the helicopter can land where it's dropping you, so it's a little bit more – there is a nuance to it. It's not all super, super extreme terrain off these crags.
Right. No, yeah. You're not jumping out of the helicopter. It's not like you see in videos with pros. It's very organized. And like our guide in this particular instance has been doing it for 20 years as a full-time job. He knows this terrain like the back of his hand. The odds of him taking a group over somebody's head is very low.
Do you see this as something that's only for wealthier people, or would you advise some regular old bros to see this as a once-in-a-lifetime experience, or what do you think of it?
I would absolutely say if you're a dedicated skier or snowboarder and you've never gone heli skiing, you should save up and do it. And you should go to BC or Alaska to do it, because those are the meccas of heli skiing where you're going to have the real experience in big mountains that's worth the money you're going to pay for it.
I was talking on a previous episode about just how ski travel is so determinate on the conditions.
Yeah. You
book your trip a couple months in advance, you kind of just get what you get. Is heli skiing guaranteed where they're going to find you good snow?
No. It's not. You get what you get. And actually, a few years ago, I did a 4-day trip in northern BC with Northern Escape heli skiing. And for half of one of the days, we couldn't fly due to the weather. So we were in a snowcat, which they have as a backup for days when the heli can't fly. So then you're just basically doing tree runs. It's much, much more mellow. But I've never been in an experience there where you couldn't fly. Obviously, that's something you always worry about with heli skiing because it's not a guarantee. They're not going to put people in danger. If there's any chance that the helicopter will have issues, they're not going to put people up, right?
I hope not. Yeah.
Of course, crashes do happen. You hear it every few years in the news with a heli ski operation. But it's very, very rare.
I'm pretty sure helicopters are the most dangerous aviation vehicle you can get in.
I don't have a stat on that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't have a stat on it either, but having lived in Hawaii where there's a lot of helicopter tour industry, it's not uncommon to have accidents go down. And when something does go wrong,
it's big. It's
you're not in a good
It's
spot.
not like you're just getting a scrape that you put a Band-Aid on.
It's not like the helicopter can flip over and you can get a payout from your injury or something like this.
Yeah.
Were you scared to fly to Canada?
No. I get the anxiety around all these. What has there been, 6 incidences or so in the last couple of months, which is a lot for the commercial airline industry, but still flying even in a time like that, like now, is so much safer than driving. You're still far more likely to die in a car accident on the way to the airport than you are on your flight.
100%. I actually have a stat on this. Ready for this? Guess what the odds of being killed in a plane crash are? And this is of present day. The odds of being killed in a plane crash are 1 in 11 million.
Sounds about right. There are something like 10,000 commercial flights a day around the world. And there have been 6 incidences in 2 months.
Yeah, and it differs. The statistics differ on whether you look at the entire world or just the U.S. So, for example, the American Airlines flight in Reagan, the one that collided with the helicopter, very sad, all those people died. Yep. That was the first fatality in 16 years in U.S. commercial aviation.
Right, I do remember hearing that.
So all the stats you see, for example...
But don't get it wrong, because I'm flying bright and early tomorrow morning, so I don't want to be
we'll prep you for your flight. Yeah. I want to hit. Where are you going?
All the way to Denver.
You're flying to Denver. Okay. Crossing the Rockies, man. Could be sketch.
Could be.
Well, okay, so here you go. Last year, there were a total of 1,425 aviation accidents, and of those, 261 were fatal. But almost all of them were just private planes and non-commercial airline flights. Right. So people, when they Google online, it's important to see what kind of flights are crashing. Is it mom and pop in their little Cessna, or is it commercial airlines? And that was the first one, the Reagan. And then on February 17th, up in Canada, when the Delta plane flipped over. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw it. I still let's talk about this for a minute, because I still So I watched the video. And I read, quite a bit about how it happened, whatever, it landed awkwardly. And at first they were saying the runway was dry, but then they're saying the runway was not dry. And I don't know what the total conclusion was on that. What info do you have on that? Because I don't understand how it's possible for a plane to completely flip a 180 like that.
Well, did you see the wing broke off?
Yeah.
Imagine being on a flight and you're coming in for a landing, everything's normal. You hear usually when the wheels hit the runway is when everyone starts to feel good.
Yeah.
But you've had 2 crashes of late. You remember the South Korea one? That was before the New Year, where it landed and just kept going on the runway. The landing gear didn't come out. So it skidded on its belly all the way to the end of the runway, crashed into a wall, and exploded. Did you ever see that video? It's intense, man.
Yeah.
And then this one, where you land, and this one, the landing gear does come out, the wheels hit, you're like, okay, we made it. And then you know how there's always that mad rush of the brakes, and there's like all that wind sound right when you hit the runway. And that's usually where I'm like, okay, let's see if we're going to stop or what's going to happen here. It turned to the one side, the wing snapped off, and then I guess that uplift from its movement just spun it over.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. Do you know if they ever determined whether the runway was wet or dry?
I didn't see it. It's February in Toronto, so I'd assume there's some sort of. But to my understanding, it didn't have to necessarily do with the fact that the wing broke off is what made it flip.
Right.
That makes sense, physically speaking, I guess. But I have no idea about the other conditions. But what I did see is how much Delta offered the passengers as a payout for this incident. Did you see this?
No, how much?
How much would you want to be paid?
I would expect at least $10,000.
You would?
Yeah.
10,000 would do it for you.
Yeah.
Well, you'd be pleased with their offer then. $30,000 a person.
Okay.
No strings attached, quote unquote. And that's the initial offer that they're being given.
And of course, if people file a lawsuit, they'll probably go to court and settle for much higher than that.
So, you know who Tim Dillon is? He's a comedian. And he had this really funny bit because they had someone on the news, I guess, after this Delta flight, and they were asking the passenger, like, how are you? And he's like, well, it was pretty crazy, but I'm doing okay. Like, I'm happy to be alive. And he put this really positive spin on it. And Tim Dillon was just watching the video, but doing like voiceover. And he's like, no, you're not fine. You're terrified. Yeah. No, you're very scared. You can never work again. You know, it's like this guy was, because he was saying, yeah, like $30,000. What are you kidding me? Like, these people should sue and get more. But you're on national television saying like, oh, I'm fine. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I mean, I can't imagine those people's experience because, you know, I remember reading one, people are like literally having these life-changing experiences with someone they've never talked to who's right next to them on the plane. And now they're going to be connected for the rest of their lives and probably in touch. And like, you know, they're like hugging. Like that must have been, I cannot even imagine what it would have been like to go through something like that. And it, you know, it reminds me now that we're talking about what you just said of the guy saying it's fine. To go back to the band thing, you know, Travis Barker from Blink-182 very famously survived a plane crash.
He did?
And even, yeah, with DJ AM, one of his close friends, died in this plane crash, and he survived. And for many, many years, he still doesn't want to fly, but for many, many years refused to fly and would, if they were playing internationally overseas, would take a ship to get there. And even before this plane crash happened, he hated flying. And he talked about this in their first documentary video, the Urethra Chronicles. He talked about how he would drive for days to get to their gigs. He would leave 2 or 3 days in advance because he didn't want to fly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the guy that is terrified of flying and hates flying gets in a plane crash and survives. And this guy is someone who travels the world all the time.
Yeah, try and tell him that his odds are good, right?
Yeah, right.
So 30,000 would be enough for you.
I mean,
like
that you're so this is so when I was 19, I was in a car accident and I broke my femur in half. And now I have a rod in my leg, right? And I got a settlement from that femur accident. And now, 20 plus years later, I'm like thinking that I should have sued and asked for a lot more money than I got. When I was 19 and they offered me this money, I thought it was a lot of money because I had no money. But like now as a 41-year-old, I'm like, I could have gotten 10 times what they offered me if I would have just gone to court. But the driver was my friend, and like I didn't want to, I don't know. That was my mindset at the time, was like, oh, I'm not trying to screw him over, like whatever.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, part of it is you want to put responsibility on someone, and there is this American culture of getting what you deserve or whatever. But yeah, sometimes it's just an accident. You don't need to ruin someone's life just because they messed up. I, too, got one settlement once from a company from Great Divide Brewing in Denver because in 2013, I was on a brewery tour of theirs, and it was an active tour. There were people working all around, and some guy got into a forklift and backed it up. And when he did that, this entire rack fell off the wall and just landed directly on me.
Oh my God.
And they ended up giving me $1,000, which was fine at the time. I didn't really get hurt. Like I went to the hospital to get checked out. Nothing was broken.
Like a rack of what was on this rack? It wasn't like kegs, because that would have really messed you
up.
No,
it was like a metal rack that was just pinned to the wall somehow, and the whole thing just collapsed. It just had small items on it, okay. And it was more of like the top of it just came and landed on the lower half of my body.
Okay.
So
you got $1,000.
Later I did, like a couple days later, they made me this offer and I accepted, sort of like you, because, all right, this was random. I didn't really miss anything. It's fine. Well, you broke your femur, so I guess yours was a lot different. But I didn't really have any big injuries. But the biggest penalty was they gave me free beer after the tour. They were like, hey, We're sorry this happened.
I mean, you're damn right they gave you free beer. You should be getting free beer for a while.
You go sit in the tap room, and we're going to, whatever you want.
We're going to get you real drunk so that you still like us after this.
Well, dude, they succeeded. I remember driving home, where I wasn't driving, obviously, but I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I was just wasted, man. I had both my feet out the passenger side window, just like chilling back and my foot, because I was pretty swollen, my foot.
Yeah.
Then she was having this party at her house, and so she had to bring me, and we were just going out for like a happy hour. We hadn't eaten anything yet, and Great Divide's a lot of high gravity brewing.
Yeah.
So I think it was the beginning of the end of my relationship, because she brought me back to this party and was excited to introduce me to all her friends. I didn't even live in Denver at the time. I was just visiting her, and I was just cooked, dude. Cooked, and just could not. Yeah, it was a bad night. For the airline, this is going to sound weird. I would go through a flipped upside down plane to get $30,000.
Oh, well, knowing that and knowing that no one died, like, it's easy to say that now, right?
Sure.
But when you're in the moment and this plane, you're watching this wing blow off and there's freaking flames skidding from the runway, like, I don't know, man. Like, that's trauma. Like, you're traumatized.
I know. I'm being a little insensitive. I think I'm being insensitive because I was looking at different media of this, and I found that at least one passenger, but maybe others, recorded like the inside when they were hanging upside down. Now, I don't know how you feel,
Yeah,
Tim.
it's 2025. Of course somebody
I know,
did that.
but for me, if I'm in it's like these people that they stumble upon a mountain lion and then they record the whole encounter.
Yeah, it's like the idiots that are taking selfies with bison at Yellowstone and like getting gored.
If you're really scared and you've really undergone trauma, are you really going to take out your phone?
No,
and
like
record it?
that person is not traumatized.
So, like, if you're hanging upside down in the airplane and everyone around you is screaming and freaked out, and your first thought is, let me take out my phone and make a video, you're not that upset.
No.
You've not been rattled. You have not gone through. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe that's the new generation, but I just thought that was interesting. So you won't be afraid to fly.
No, I'm not afraid to fly. To me, I'm still more afraid to drive. I mean, I'm not like afraid to drive, but I would be more afraid to drive than I am to fly.
There's definitely something about, I was driving to Flagstaff or home from Flagstaff yesterday, and it's a lot of 2-lane roads, one in each direction, and you have all these semis coming. And
yeah, that's an intense road, the route up through Utah from Flagstaff.
You're literally feet away from dying.
All the time.
All the time. Because you have these massive vehicles coming by within feet of you, and just one little check of your phone, you swerve the wrong way really quick, and bam, you're done. There's something about dying in an airplane that, man, it's just, I'm not afraid of it, because maybe this is an ego thing. Like, my mom, when I just saw her, and she was, of course, like, she knows I fly all the time for work. So she's, oh, well, planes are crashing. You really need to be careful, etc. Like, okay, well, here's the thing. If I die in an airplane accident, and I'll say this here, you guys can play back this tape, I'm fine with it. Everybody should just celebrate it, because, A, it's not like I did anything. The plane crashed. It's not like Will, Will was driving and, he swerved into the other road.
That's
like, what
the
an
thing.
idiot.
You're not liable.
Correct.
You're not liable.
It's just like, it's more of like, oh, look what happened to Will. And wow, he really went down when he was doing what he loves. Like, good for him. And I think I would truly feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. And, a year ago I was in Phoenix reporting on Waymo, the autonomous car company. And so many people said to me, I wouldn't trust that with my life. And my experience there was positive, and aside from the reporting I did, my personal opinion about autonomous vehicles after that experience is that I cannot wait for them, because it passes the liability back to the corporations. It takes the liability away from me and it gives it back to the man, right? I'm no longer liable. If something happens, it's not my fault. So it's also eliminating the human factor, and it's taking the liability away. Like, autonomous vehicles are the greatest thing that's happened to the automotive industry in forever, because we are no longer going to think of how much money we're going to save. We're not going to have to pay for insurance. That's going to be them. It'll be factored into the rate, sure, but maybe people will learn to be more, hesitant to get in a car. I think there are so many positives that can happen with this technology that I cannot wait for it to expand.
So tell us about, you went down there to report on it as a travel story?
Yeah. So I landed in Phoenix at like 7:30 in the morning and got picked up in the airport by a Waymo.
Waymo.
W-A-Y-M-O. It's like an Uber. You book it through an app. It's exactly like Uber. There's just no driver in the car.
And so what was your experience?
I mean, I admittedly was a little, I had some butterflies the first time, but once you get in, like, the cars are nice. They're all electric Jaguars. They're like these really nice cars. You get in, it's playing calming music.
Oh, very nice.
And like you can see on a screen in the back of the car, like the little the console that's in between the two front seats. On the back of it, there's like a screen, so you can see what the car sees as you're moving down the road. So you see all the other cars around you and the stoplights and the trees and the people. Like, you can see everything that the car is detecting. And it's honestly like comforting in a way. And we can link to this story in the show notes if you want. Like, it was a pretty cool experience. And they drive pretty conservatively. They don't, at this point, they're not going on the interstate. It's all roads and neighborhoods and stuff. But it was a positive experience, and of course, the development of this technology has had its flaws, and it hasn't been perfect, but nothing is perfect. I personally am excited for it.
So it's actively working in Phoenix now.
It's in Phoenix, San Francisco, LA, and I think they just launched in Austin last week.
Was it comparable price to an Uber?
It's about the same, yeah.
And the car is the exact same setup. It's not a pod or anything. There are two seats in the front.
It's a car. There's a steering wheel in the driver's seat that moves as it turns. There's just no one turning. It's kind of weird at first. Like I was like taking videos on my phone because it's kind of the first couple of rides you're like, this is a freaking trip, man. But then once you're used to it, like some of the people I was talking to in Phoenix are like, yeah, like it's not even a thing for us anymore. We do this all the time.
Why do you think they put a steering wheel?
I would imagine it's in case of an emergency and a driver has to take over.
Was that an option on your app? I'm assuming you're doing this through an app, like an Uber app.
Yeah, you book it through the Waymo One app. So it's very similar to Uber. And actually, I think in most, if not all of the places Waymo operates now, you can book them through Uber. They've partnered.
Was there any instruction about, hey, if this goes around in a circle, you can jump up and take the wheel?
Not that specifically, no, but there is instructions in the app on what to do in various situations, and there is also a communication device where you can call the center, the customer service center or whatever, and talk to somebody.
Do you know approximately how many vehicles are on the road?
I have no idea, but they're all the same. They're all white Jaguars.
I feel like it's great in a lot of ways, but my old man curmudgeon travel is just popping up a little because some of the best intel I get when I'm traveling are from cab drivers and Uber drivers.
Oh, sure.
Get in the Uber from the airport, start chatting whoever up, and whatever their viewpoint of their place of living is, you get that immediately.
That's your immediate view of their city.
Well, you have to understand who you're talking to.
I do get that, and you're losing that with a Waymo for sure. But you're also gaining, as one of the things that I talked about in the story and that I asked Waymo when I interviewed them, and they elaborated on, was safety concerns. If you are a single female leaving a bar late at night, you now no longer have to worry about a male driver that you don't know or somebody seeing where you get dropped off or whatever. You lose some things and you gain some things with it. It's not. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I wouldn't say that it's a perfect solution, but I think it's a step forward.
My other worry with automated cars in general, although I do agree the safety aspect is huge, I'm just worried in our society as things goes, we're just going to be expected to work during that time. Like now commute time will be,
sure.
Okay, well, you actually can start right when you leave your house. You can jump online and...
But I mean, it's kind of nice though in that sense too. Like you don't have to worry about driving. You can sit here and just chill. You can nap. You can go through your emails. You can do what you want without having to drive. And I know like a lot of people actually like driving, but for me, the more I've experienced traveling by public transit, traveling, with my couple day limited experience with Waymo, traveling on a train, plane, whatever. Anything where I can use that time how I want to use it and make it as efficient as I can, even if that efficiency is sleeping, I take that as a plus. And I get that not everybody is going to agree with that statement, but that's my view.
You know what we should do? Maybe we could pitch this to them. What would be awesome is if you got in the Waymo, there were a series of guides you could select. So, you land in Phoenix. Just select overview of Phoenix, and then your voice comes on. Hey, welcome to Phoenix. Let me tell you a few things about it. I'm a travel writer. Talk about it a little bit as you go through a different neighborhood. Let me do this. I want to learn more about spring training. Hit the spring training button. So now when you're in the Uber or the Waymo, there's no driver, but you have some guided material that's talking to you.
Dude, that is a great idea, man. We might have just launched a business right now.
Let's pitch it.
We should pitch that
Let's
out.
do it. We'll edit this out so no one else hears it.
On that note, let's pause and get a beer.
Yeah, all right, let's do it. And we're back. Okay, so in your bio, you have that you're an author focused on, you're talking about going down, doing the electric car stuff. You're focused on conservation, outdoor rec, and technology, the merger of that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about how you got an interest in that and why that's your beat now, this area.
So my broad stroke view on that is a lot of the pushback, I think, against the climate movement in particular is against its messaging. I think the climate movement historically has done a terrible job of being inclusive and of actually portraying what it wants to do without making people feel like they're alienated. I don't believe that you can tell people that they're wrong, that their career is wrong, or that their lifestyle is wrong, and expect them to get on board with your movement. So I try to use my reporting in a manner that focuses on the actual issues at hand that will make the world and society a better place. One of those pillars absolutely being conservation and advocacy for public lands, and another being embracing technology to bring us into a more sustainable future. One thing that I wholeheartedly disagree with is that in order to live a more sustainable lifestyle, we need to go back to how the world was hundreds of years ago. And I that's, first of all, never going to happen. And second of all, false. We have the technologies at hand right now to mitigate many of the major impacts of the climate disaster. It's just a matter of getting them implemented and of getting widespread public support. And in order to do that, you need to focus on solutions rather than just telling people how fucked we are all the time.
So tell us about this recent story you did about carbon emissions for airplanes.
Sure,
that was a big one, right?
That's a great example. So I recently did a reported story about direct air capture, DAC. You'll hear it abbreviated for short, which effectively is a technology that is evolving. It's in place now in minor forms, but it's evolving and will be scaled in the coming years to pull carbon out of the air. There's a company called Climeworks that's a Swiss company that is leading the charge on this as far as bringing the technology forth in a manner that can be implemented around the world and that people can participate in. They have a direct air capture plant opened in Iceland and are opening another one shortly. If people want to be involved right now, what they can do is sign up as a pioneer. They can contribute $8 a month, which I've been doing since the program launched, to help the company further their mission and effectively pull their own carbon footprint out of the air. And of course, right now, it's in development stages, this technology. It's still evolving and is nowhere near making the difference that it will be making in the future.
Okay, wait, hold on. So what are we thinking about here? This is a box that pulls carbon out of the air. What does that mean?
Basically, it looks kind of like a fan. It's kind of like a stack of a bunch of fans that operate in a manner that traps carbon, sequesters it, turns it into stone, and then typically buries that stone underground. So basically what it's doing is, if you follow climate reporting a lot, you'll see the number 350 parts per million used a lot, which is a number that scientists have noted is a tipping point, and in certain parts of the world we're already past this tipping point of 350 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air that will warm the planet to a point where we will not be able to retreat to where we were before. So the point of carbon direct air capture, DAC, is pulling that out of the air so that the number, whatever it might be in that area, goes down. And it can be done in a couple of manners. The way that I think is the most useful is, as I've said, DAC, direct air capture, as Climeworks is doing it, where they're building plants in different places to pull carbon out of the air. Oil and gas companies and other, the steel industry, other highly emitting industries will use a technology called carbon capture, which is it's basically the same thing, but they'll put it on top of a smokestack or on top of a plant to basically capture the pollution before it's released into the air, which I also think is a good development. You'll hear critics say that, this is just enabling them to continue to use fossil fuels. It's just enabling these companies to continue to pollute and to profit and whatever. I mean, that's true to an extent. But the fact of the matter is that there's not going to be a single day now or in the future where there's just a switch flipped and all of a sudden we're not using oil and gas at all. That's not going to happen. So in my view, we need all hands on deck. We need all solutions, and that this technology should be embraced. And the gist of my story was that some airlines, United, actually, after my story published, I think it was just last week, announced a hundreds of millions of dollar investment in direct air capture. There are some European airlines that have already committed a lot of money to this as a way to make an industry like commercial airfare, which is never going to be a zero carbon industry, and it's never going to be there. So this is one of their best chances, along with sustainable aviation fuel, of lowering the footprint of air travel, right? And so the piece was telling that story. It was. I spoke with Climeworks. I spoke with a company called Tomorrow's Air, which is an advocacy and activism group that is pushing this technology forward. And I spoke with Airlines for America about where they see this playing out for American Airlines. Not American Airlines, the specific company, American Airlines broadly, all of them.
All right, well, a couple questions. First off, so this is a black box. It pulls the carbon out of the air. It turns it into a stone that is then buried.
Yeah.
The stone that's buried obviously causes no disruption to the earth.
Not unless that stone is shattered at some point in the future.
Okay. And how big of a radius can this thing pull from? Let's say this one's in Iceland. Can it capture the air only within a couple miles around it? Is it pulling air in from... It's only the air it sucks in through the fans?
Yeah, to my knowledge, it's just the air that is going through the fans.
Well, and Jesus, so, how many of these things would we need?
Yeah, obviously it needs to scale a lot. And this first plan is basically, it was their proof of concept, right? Like it was them proving that this can work. And the one that is opening later will be much bigger.
How big?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but a magnitude of times bigger than the one that's operating now.
I guess I'm trying to just get an idea if it's like a solar panel field where it's... Because when I just think of an air being sucked through a fan...
So it looks more like an industrial plant than it does like a solar field. It's a structure that has these fans on it that pulls it out.
If we can connect these things to power plant stacks, why don't we just put them on the plane itself?
I mean, I don't know if that would be an impossible thing to do. It seems like maybe down the line that's something that might be possible. I don't think there's a technology for that right now, because it's not just the fan, it's the whole process of sequestering that and storing it. And so there would have to be something affixed to the engine of the plane to store that carbon in while it's in flight. So I can't say whether or not that's something that's possible in the future. It doesn't sound impossible to me, but I'm not the engineer behind the project. So,
what was the reaction to your story?
I got a negative email from a climate advocacy group that I quoted in the article. I sent some questions to their executive director, and he's been an outspoken critic of direct air capture for exactly the reasons I said, that it in his view, it will just enable polluters to keep polluting. That has been the general negative response is that statement, along with the fact that it, of course, takes power to power these carbon removal plants, and so they will need to be powered by renewable energy, or else they're not nearly as effective.
What does someone like that want? Because the journey of 1,000 miles, you have to start somewhere. Sounds like they're just saying, well, until the perfect solution comes along or until we can eliminate everything, then we shouldn't even try.
Yeah, I mean, it's more nuanced than that. There's arguments that people should look for other methods of travel than flying, that people should fly less, yada, 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 which, there's validity to all of that. However, the fact of the matter is that society isn't going to revert. That's just not going to happen. I am all on board with rail. I donate regularly to the High Speed Rail Alliance. I fully support high-speed rail across the United States. I wish so badly that I could take a train when I want to travel in the U.S. Like I'm ashamed of the lack of viability of train travel, particularly in the Western U.S. But the fact of the matter is that we're not there right now. We're never going to be at a point where commercial air travel is not a thing.
It's funny you say that. One quick side thing. My friend, she lives in Switzerland. She's coming to the U.S. this spring, and I asked her what she was going to do, and she said she's going to see America by train.
Good for her. I hope she has some time.
And I said to her, that's a very European thing to do. That is like the most anti-American thing you can do to see our country. Like, no American has ever done that, I don't think.
People do it. It's a thing with Amtrak. And, we in Palisade, we have the Rocky Mountaineer that goes through our town here. But it's just not a viable way to get from point A to point B in the U.S. unless you're on the eastern seaboard. That's the only place in the U.S. where you can do something like that and have it be efficient for, daily commuting.
100%. So after doing this story, how should we feel about carbon emissions in the travel industry? Does it impact the way you're going to travel? How do you think about it?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I generally will take the Bustang when I'm going to Denver, which is a bus instead of flying. The only reason I'm flying tomorrow, and it's actually a null reason now, because I'm going tomorrow to a press event that starts at 3 p.m. So I was going to take the 7:45 Bustang from Grand Junction and get into Union Station at 1:45. I ended up buying a one-way flight using points to go to Denver from the Grand Junction Airport because it turned out that Bicycle Colorado, nonprofit that advocates for bicycle-friendly legislature, was having a lobby day at the Capitol, and I believed that it was tomorrow. And so I was going to fly up there. I'm leaving at 5:30. I'd get in at 6:40 or whatever, take the A-line down to Union Station and walk up the street to go to the Capitol to join this lobbying group before I had to go to the event later in the day. I had the day wrong. It was today, so I missed the bike lobbying event. So my reason for flying is null, but I've already bought the ticket.
You missed the event, and you're going to destroy the planet?
I know.
Come on,
it's
Tim.
terrible. I'm gonna have to make an extra donation to Climeworks.
Your whole reputation is just. Do you pay for the? I know some airlines let you offset your carbon emissions.
Yeah, I used to do that. There's been a lot of studies around offsets. Some of them are validated. A lot of times, carbon offsets.
Tell us what is a carbon offset?
At its core, in a perfect world, a carbon offset removes the amount of carbon that you emit by doing a certain activity. So if you're flying from Denver to Chicago and you buy the carbon offset to offset your emissions from that flight, your portion of the plane's emissions, it would plant a tree or part of a tree to offset that, or it would conserve a portion of the forest in the Amazon that is set for demolition to offset that. And at its core, it's good. There have been proven use cases of it being effective, but there have also been a lot of studies showing that carbon offsets often go to conservation projects that would have happened anyway. So you're effectively saving a tree that was not in danger of being cut down, or something similar to that.
Okay. Question on that, because if you're paying, do you know how much it usually costs to offset?
To offset a typical one-way domestic flight is something like $7, $12. It's not a ton of money.
But you could plant your own tree. right?
You
If
could.
you wanted.
I mean, there's
Okay.
any number of things you could do. The reason I stopped doing it is A, because I'm contributing to Climeworks, and B, because I don't want to contribute to something that's not helping. I have, in last couple of years, bought offsets for certain things, but I no longer do it for every flight that I take. I am very proactive in taking public transit and biking, doing other things, living a very low trash production lifestyle. You know, it sounds douchey to say these things. Honestly, every time I have this conversation, I'm like, I wonder how I come across. But like, the point is that you can take small steps in your life that are not disruptive and in fact improve your own quality of life while simultaneously reducing your footprint, reducing your impact in a manner that is more effective than buying an $8 carbon offset credit.
I don't think you come off douchey. I always just think of you as that friend where when you invite me to do something, I know that it's going to take twice as long to get there because you're going to make me take the bus. But it's good, man.
I'm fine being that friend.
People like you.
It's funny as long as like I said, I think there's been such a bad vibe put out by the environmental movement for such a long time that I just don't want to be furthering that. I like to focus on solutions rather than telling people that we're all fucked.
Well, I think it's that too, and I think for me, I don't like to be lectured about why what I'm doing is wrong by someone who stands at a podium and then turns around and gets on a private jet. I think that was the whole thing with Al Gore, the criticism of him. He would fly all around the world in a private jet talking about the climate crisis. Okay, it's like your message is good, but you're not really walking the talk or whatever.
And Al Gore, it's funny because I in 2017 went through the training program by his nonprofit, the Climate Reality Project, so I'm a certified climate reality leader.
Wait, what is that?
So it's basically they train you and certify you to give a version of the presentation that he gave in the movie An Inconvenient Truth. So I've given that speech in Bali, in California, in Denver. I've given it a number of times over the years.
Really?
I haven't done it in a while because it, as you noted, it definitely comes across as preachy. And Al Gore had to make a number of lifestyle changes once he started receiving that feedback. And I can't speak to exactly what he was guilty of and what changes he's made, but I know that he addressed, when I saw him speak at this training conference I went to, he addressed that and acknowledged it. And, I don't want to, I'm not trying to absolve him of guilt or whatever, think what you're going to think about Al Gore. But,
well, I don't think he's wrong because you got to get around. It's just if you don't incorporate that into the message, if you just kind of ignore your own behavior. I mean, we've all met people like this with climate. People want to preach or they just read something. The media is doing this a lot. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I feel like we've seen a lot more stories in the media about sustainability and travel. And you cover this a lot, so you're the guy to talk to. People are made to feel guilty at times for traveling. Or for, perfect example, you go to a hotel and you're paying $300 a night because you're on your honeymoon or your anniversary or whatever it is, a special getaway. Any trip can be special. And you're kind of made to feel guilty, like, oh, do you really want a fresh towel tomorrow? Well, don't you want to save the planet? It's like, okay, well, I'm paying $300 a night. I kind of wanted a fresh towel. It seems nice.
Yeah, and I mean, that's definitive greenwashing is that kind of stuff,
So there's a lot of greenwashing, and I know that's a petty example, but that is happening. And then now we start to see more stories about your carbon footprints and should you be traveling? Is it conscious to travel?
Well, and another thing I've advocated for in more opinion-driven writing that I've done is that travel actually opens people's minds to the reasons why we need to care about these things. And so getting out and seeing the world is a good thing. And, I interviewed many years ago one of my heroes, Jeremy Jones, the professional snowboarder and the founder of Protect Our Winters. And he said, I asked him about that because he's traveled all over the world as a pro snowboarder. And his answer was like, look, we're in the situation we're in right now because we have so many people casting ballots who have never left their backyard. We need people to travel. We need people to gain empathy, not only for the planet, but for other people, for people who live different lifestyles than they do. And that is the beauty of travel, and I will advocate for that all day. And the last thing I'd say about Al Gore, not even Al Gore, but the Climate Reality Project, the reason I signed up for that training in 2017 was because if you actually watch An Inconvenient Truth all the way to the end, it is all about solutions. And it does lay out that we have these technologies. And it lays out all the things I've advocated for all these years, the Climate Reality Project.
Well, let's just keep this in context, because I think a lot of people, when they listen to this stuff, they have two reactions. One, they feel annoyed because...
Yeah, people are tired of hearing about it, for sure.
Or they feel lectured, or they feel guilty. They feel like, man, I travel a lot, and am I thinking about this enough? But some stats to put it all in perspective. Tourism in general, which includes...
I want to point out that you're actually reading off a doc right now. You're not just rambling. So Will deserves some respect here.
I am a journalist too, buddy. Tourism in total, okay, so that includes transportation, hotels, tour operators, the entire footprint of tourism is responsible for 8% of global carbon emissions.
Yep,
8%.
And air travel is half that. Air travel is only half of that number.
Air transport in 2016 was 1.9%.
Yeah.
In April of 2024, 2.5% of the world's emissions.
Okay.
Very low numbers.
I've seen numbers up to 4, but even up to 4, I would say, is for something that's as carbon intensive as flying a plane, that's a pretty low number. And it signals a lot of things. Not only does it signal that there's progress to be made in that industry, it signals how bad some other sectors of the economy are doing compared to travel.
100%. So what are you might be thinking, what are the top industries that contribute to global carbon emissions? Power and heat generation, energy production, about 40%, followed by industry, which breaks down into a lot of manufacturing, production, etc., 31%. Transportation as a whole, including planes, trains, daily cars, driving, 24% of total global emissions, transportation. And then building of buildings, really, producing the cities and the civilization that we live in contributes to about 6%. Obviously, these numbers are going to differ based on your sources, but just for the sake of the conversation.
Rough. But the important thing to note about all of these contributors that you've noted here is that there are technologies available now and tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of capital going into startups that are trying to solve that issue in every single one of those industries. We have or will have scalable solutions within the next decade to all of these problems. And it's up to us whether or not we implement them at scale.
I think we will. I think it's just going to take time. It's just like anything else, a new generation, a new way of thinking. Anybody that's lived a certain way for a very long time is going to be hesitant to change. The less that's a part of your life, the more acceptant you're going to be to when it comes through.
Yeah.
So I have faith that, no, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, yeah, right now, a lot of our green technology is powered by fossil fuels. That's how we're starting, but it's moving in the right direction. Here's the crazy thing. 2.5% of world's emissions, let's say it's 4% for air travel. Last year, there were, this is back from the airplane statistics, 7 fatal accidents in the entire world for 40 million flights. 40 million flights. And you know what's crazy about that number, Tim? And this is kind of the issue, which I do agree with, because we're trying to get more and more people to travel. Only 10% of the world takes a commercial flight each year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Only 10%.
Because a lot of that 10% takes a lot of commercial flights.
Yeah, business people.
Going back to the solutions focus and the need for positive news, for positive information, I would encourage people that want to follow up on what I just said about the fact that there are solutions and there's money pouring into solutions. Sign up for the Keep Cool newsletter from Nick Von Osdol. He sends out a newsletter a couple of times a week that literally outlines each venture deal and each development and technology that's happening in the clean tech space. And it's not the most exciting read, but if you want some positive news, it's a really cool thing to see.
One more tidbit before we move on to, I want to talk about this hotel in Denver that you recently covered because it goes along this topic.
I'm going there tomorrow.
Okay, great. So we'll talk about it in a second. But I thought, leading up to this podcast, that you may try and convince me to fly less because you're the green energy guy. But now that I've found out what you're doing tomorrow.
Well, you know what? And hold on. But while we're on that, and because this is important to note, and I should have probably said it 20 minutes ago, but I view, in a lot of ways, flying as similar to public transit in that it's the plane's going whether you're on it or not. The more people that are on that plane, the lower the personal footprint of each person on that plane. And, of course, more flying equals more planes. But the more people are accustomed to traveling without their personal vehicle every single place they go, the better, in my view.
Agreed. And I will defend the everyday traveler because I consider myself one. Because the percentage is so low, right? We're talking 4%, 2.5% to 4% of the world's emissions are from air travelers like us. So there's maybe some other people that should take the bullet before us. I don't think it takes a big argument to explain how us getting on a plane and going to a different country has a net positive on our mindset, our exposure to the world, our connection, our ability to create more of a global understanding. So there is give and take. Yeah, we're offsetting, but we're bringing a lot back with us. But I made a list of people who I think, if we're going to point the finger at anybody,
no, that's not any good.
Should be pointed at before me, the everyday traveler.
Let's hear it.
Okay? Number one, sports teams.
Sure.
Why, just because you play basketball, do you get to fly all around the United States, or because you play football, it's okay for you to take a private plane and go all around just to play a game? But I am going to have to read about how I'm killing the planet by taking my trip to Mexico? That doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
Does it? Okay. All the musicians you mentioned who are at the top of their game, flying all over the world just to play a rock concert. Why does Taylor Swift get to fly to London?
And shooting out a bunch of plastic confetti at that concert and having burners that are powered by gas do their flames while they're on stage. It's a whole thing. It doesn't even stop with their flights to get there.
No. Why do these people get to do it? How come no one makes them feel bad? Oh, because they're making a ton of money for everybody? Or whatever, because they're entertainers?
Songs inspire us, man.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I'm not telling them to stop. I think it's fine. But if you're going to point the finger at me, I don't think that's fair. How about all our politicians that take private flights all over? And, I mean, even our political system, we have representatives. We saw it the other night. They're all flying back to D.C. for these events, but they live here. They fly back and forth, back and forth. We pay that for our tax dollar. Why do they get to do it, but then they shame us? All right, I'm going to digress here. But I just feel like the everyday traveler should not be punished for wanting to explore the world and to take advantage of what they can do.
I agree 100%. And I would add that the idea of the personal carbon footprint was invented by British Petroleum as a way to shift blame from oil and gas companies to the individual. There's a friend of mine that I also admire as a great writer and climate leading voice in climate, Auden Schendler from Aspen Snowmass, who has basically enabled that company to become the leading voice in the ski industry for climate action and done it in a scalable manner. You know, his whole recent book that he wrote about was about how the shifts that need to happen. Yes, you can make changes in your life, and you should where you can, but we need societal change. We need corporate change, and we need responsibility to be held on the decision makers, not just the people. It's not the people's fault that we're in this situation. We asked for a comfortable life, but we didn't ask for that comfortable life to happen in a manner that destroys the planet.
Is that true that it was invented by BP?
Yeah.
Really? They can trace that back?
Yeah.
And they have documents saying it was to shift the blame specifically?
It was, I believe, first reported by the San Diego newspaper in the early 90s.
That's wild.
That's how it originated, yeah.
That's brutal. All right, well, tell us about this hotel you're going to. I know you've been there once. You're going tomorrow. It's in Denver, one of the newest hotels in the country, and it's a pretty special place from what I understand.
Populous.
Tell us about it.
So their claim to fame is that they're the first carbon-positive hotel, meaning that their existence removes more carbon from the atmosphere than it produces.
They build from scratch?
They did build from scratch on a lot in downtown Denver, using lower emissions concrete, using a design that optimizes light and heat flow into the building so that they're heating and cooling less. And there's a big solar garden on the roof. There is a tree planted for each guest night that they sell. The food and beverage program on site is focused almost entirely, if not entirely, on locally sourced ingredients and traceable ethics. I wouldn't say that they're perfect. When I did the story on them back in October, I was very impressed with what they're doing and the fact that they're putting themselves out there in a manner that is absolutely going to get them ridiculed left and right.
Ridiculed?
But they're also getting a lot of praise. They've gotten a ton of press. I'm not sure I've ever seen a hotel get so much press before they even opened, just because of these initiatives that they're taking. And it is really cool. The rooms are awesome. The event I'm going to tomorrow is put on by Smartwool and Icebreaker, where they're hosting a panel about sustainable developments in the apparel industry. So they're really putting themselves into this scene and doing so in a manner that is verifiable. If you go on the Populous website, you can actually see what they're doing and how, starting with the construction of the building. It's not, again, like the carbon positive thing, I'm somewhat skeptical of that claim, just because it's tough to say that it would be the world would be better off if it didn't exist. But I do think it is absolutely or the world would be worse off if it didn't exist. I do think it's a huge step forward for the hospitality industry, and I hope that Aparium, the company behind Populous, is able to bring this concept more and inspire other boutique hospitality companies to do the same thing.
It's interesting you say that, because that was on the tip of my tongue, and that's kind of what I think I poorly expressed a few minutes ago. When you're in a hotel, you have your fresh towel with a little card on it or on your bed that says, hey, you should really make the right decision and not wash your sheets tonight. Even though you're on your honeymoon and God knows what's happening in there, you should really reuse your sheets every night, right? Reuse your towel, etc.
Yeah.
You're going to make the world a better place. But then you kind of look around, you're like, I'm in a 300-room hotel. The existence of this place in general is not sustainable. Mm-hmm. We're at a resort on a Mexican coast that's drawing water from the desert, right? We're in Vegas. Like, there's a lot of these principles, and this is what I'm trying to get through in my own mind. Like, what's greenwashing and what can I really make an impact in? If I go to a hotel in Vegas and I don't wash my towel, did I really make a difference? Because just by them existing in Vegas, they're pulling all these resources that, is kind of wrong. Like, if I'm going to say I don't want to use my towel, I might as well just not stay there. Right? Yeah. So, like, what are your tips for people? Like, how do we, and even you're saying this hotel now coming out with all this branding and, oh my God, they have windows where the sun comes through. Wow, what a novel idea. How do we cut through some of these marketing attempts and actually know what we're contributing to or what's real?
Yeah, I mean, with hotels specifically, you can typically look on their website and they'll have a sustainability page that outlines what they're doing. And if it's actually worthwhile, there will be it's pretty easy to tell if it's just a hotel that is like, oh, we're telling people not to wash their towels. Oh yeah, we provide a recycling bin in each room. Like, it's easy to tell the difference between that and Populous. It's very, very easy. Go look at Populous's website. There's another hotel Oh man, I should know the name of it. I'm gonna have to look it up here in a second. In New Haven, Connecticut, that is similar. Offering a bunch of EV chargers on site, doing doing everything they can to minimize their impact. So it's very easy to tell the difference between properties like that and corporate greenwashing. It's honestly like it's not that hard. It's not any more difficult than telling the difference between a news article and an opinion piece.
Hotel Marcel.
Yes, Hotel Marcel.
By using 100% renewable energy and eliminating the use of fossil fuels, every year the Hotel Marcel has a carbon reduction impact equivalent to creating 846 acres of, I'm guessing, new forest, but it cuts off. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's easy to tell the difference between that, and I'm a firm believer that stuff like media literacy should be taught in high school and yada yada yada, because a lot of the misconceptions and false narratives and misinformation in society is perpetuated because people aren't taught how to tell the difference between what is verifiable and what is not. And it stems deeper than reading your local newspaper. It's what we're talking about now, and it's really everything. It's going to the grocery store and knowing that you're buying a peach that was grown up the street from you, as opposed to buying a peach that was shipped in from Mexico. It's not that hard if you know what to look for.
I think it's just a good thing to think about, and we don't have to beat it to death. I think the idea that this populous hotel exists, this Hotel Marcel exists, it moves things in that direction. It gets people thinking in that way, and that's the important thing. I don't think it's on the onus, again, for travelers to feel bad if they don't stay in these places.
Right. It's not always possible.
It's really more on the hotel industry.
And it's also expensive. Staying at Populous is more expensive than staying at the Motel 6. It's undeniable that this stuff comes at a cost.
Funny you should say that, Tim, because I have another stat here for you from your story. And I wrote down, this is the part that worries me. The data combined with the rise in demand for responsible travel suggests that hotel operators can successfully charge 10 to 25% more for a room if they've met consumer sustainability demands.
Yeah, 100%.
You wrote that.
At least that much, I would say, in some cases.
Is that where we're headed? I mean, if we move forward in this direction and hotels start to become more sustainable, we're going to pay for it, right?
We're going to be part of paying for it, for sure.
Yep. But maybe it's something we should pay for.
I mean, I would say yes. Of course, there are arguments that that's prohibitive to some people, and it is. That's undeniable. I have a buddy who I was on a call with a while ago, and he was talking about specifically airline carbon offsets, where he was buying a flight, and it asked him if he wanted to pay $8 or whatever, and he was like, "No, Delta, you pay $8. You pay the $8 to offset my flight," and I agree with him.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think when it's a small amount like that, the company should at least split it with you. I view it like, I've had clients as a writer who pay me via PayPal, and when it's a business transaction, you have to pay a fee to get that money. And my argument has always been that fee should be split, right? Like, I mean, maybe if it's specifically a one-off, I'm doing a project for you, I'm the client, you're the business, I'll cover the fee, whatever. But if this is an ongoing arrangement, we should have a conversation about either splitting that fee or finding another way to pay.
Couldn't agree more. How are you on time? Are you down for, I got a few more topics. One more beer, or do you got to go?
I think I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll take a quick pause.
Take a quick pee break.
1 second. Yeah. All right. We're back, and getting back to airlines, I don't know if you saw this. This was an interesting story I came across. The headline caught my eye. It said, "Airline sells out unique unknown destination flight." Did you
Interesting.
See this? Did you see this? Yeah, so it was Scandinavian Airlines, SAS, and for all their, whatever their mileage program is called, but for their mileage members, they offered the opportunity. I can't remember if it was a raffle or you buy in, but it was a trip to an unknown destination.
Does it tell you how long the flight is?
Nope. So this is the second time they've done it. The first time, they did it. It sold out immediately. It already sold out immediately, as the headline in it, for the second time. The first time, they flew to Athens. That's where the trip ended up being.
From Stockholm or from where?
Fuck. No,
from somewhere in Scandinavia.
Yeah, from somewhere. But
Okay.
let's look it up. Let me read it.
And so they obviously are like arranging your hotel and transit and all that stuff because you know nothing. It's like one of those. That's like a push now there's some tour operators that will do that. They're like they book you like a mystery trip and you don't know where you're going till you get to the airport.
That's exactly what this was.
Yeah.
I'm just looking up where they leave from. Oh, from Copenhagen.
Okay.
Denmark, Copenhagen. There was nothing in this coverage of the new one about like if you don't know where you're going, how do you book hotels and activities? But I think it's just an all-inclusive.
Yeah, they've got to be
trip.
taking care of all that. That's pretty exciting. Can you imagine like you're walking down the terminal at the airport and at each gate there's the sign that says where the flight is going and you get to yours and it just says unknown.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they didn't. So that was a great thing because I was wondering like wouldn't you know when you get to the airport? It doesn't. They didn't know until after takeoff. After takeoff, they do some presentation for everybody. So I doubt you actually go through the airport. It's probably more of a private experience. But let's see. No, this is from February 18th, 2025. It sold out in 4 minutes.
Wow.
4 minutes. Now, it's only one plane. I'm sure they pumped it up. But last year, when they went to Athens, brought together participants in age from 19 to 81. And there were travelers from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, United Kingdom, United States. I'm just curious what you think. Could this be a thing in the airline industry where you fly somewhere you don't know where you're going? That's the ultimate. Everybody wants spontaneity.
Yeah, I think it's a thing already. I think like I noted, there are tour operators that do that. That's their whole thing is like surprise trips. For like maybe it's your bachelor party or your bachelorette party or your birthday or something, and like so you give them a budget and like a no list of things you don't want to do or places you've already been or whatever, and they have like a list of places that they'll arrange based on what your budget is. I mean I've never done that, but it sounds kind of cool.
I think it's a cool idea, man. I don't know if I like it for something like a bachelor party or a life event. I think I like because there's just too many people. When you're with a big group and you know them all, it's hard to please everyone. I mean, God knows we've all tried to do life events ourselves. Like, oh, what am I going to do for my birthday? Oh, well, this person, you can kind of see the people in your life who wouldn't want to do certain things. But if it were this, where it's just me and a friend or me and a girlfriend or something, where we're going to sign up for a trip to nowhere and just, all right, let's see. I think that's kind of intriguing.
Yeah, I would do it. I mean, obviously, I don't want to do it badly enough that I've done it. So
well, there's not a lot of opportunities.
I don't want to I'm kind of like that person that says they're going to do it and never actually take action. But I think it sounds cool.
Did you ever do it for the rental cars, where you can do the mystery cars?
No, is that like the same thing?
Yeah, like you look on Expedia. It's not the same thing. No, not at all. But
like I don't say, if you're driving, how do you not know where you're going?
For example, if you're looking up a rental car in Mexico on Expedia, some companies will have, you can get the intermediate, you can get the compact, you can really select what you want. Or for a deal, it'll just be like mystery car.
So that just means whatever they didn't rent that day.
Correct. Yeah. But you're getting it at a discounted price.
Sure.
So, and a lot of times Priceline does that. That's their whole vibe, where it's, here's a hotel for $120. Do you want it? But you don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
So there's already some things like that. That whole tour operator thing is interesting, but this really interests me with this flight specifically because you can just individually sign up and do it. I just think it's neat. Now, the problem is for someone like you who's traveled so much, what if they took you to somewhere
if it's just
been?
Like freaking LA or like Miami, I guess
you make the best of it.
Yeah.
You can visit a place twice and have it be fine.
Like it almost actually I'm going to reframe my statement. It would be better as like a US traveler and somebody that's relatively well traveled to go and do it from Copenhagen, because then you almost know it's going to be somewhere more exciting than you would go flying out of Denver. Right?
100%. Yeah, because they're not going to fly you unknown internationally across the Atlantic.
Yeah, you're not getting on a mystery flight from Denver to Athens. It's going to be Denver to like Baltimore.
I saw that and I just thought that it could be a really, really cool thing for people to consider, for more airlines to do. I've never seen an American airline do that.
I mean, you know what? It could be cool if you're like, if it's like a guaranteed you're going international and you've never traveled internationally, but you're nervous about it. This could be a great way to do it, right? To like do your first, pop that cherry, for lack of a better term. Like go abroad and like have it all be taken care of and know that you're doing something cooler than just going to the Riviera Maya where every single American tourist goes.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
A lot of business ideas this show. Well, hey, I was talking about car rental in Mexico, and I think I forgot. I never told you my recent story.
Okay.
Did I tell you where I had
No,
to...
but I'm glad that we're doing this now because you have a story, and I have a pretty funny story about a car rental in Mexico that I'll follow up with yours.
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So in Mexico, in October, myself, my wife, she turned 3 on the trip, so my 3-year-old daughter and my wife's aunt and uncle went to Mexico. We flew into Guadalajara, rented... we didn't know this was what was going to happen. We flew into Guadalajara. We had a 2-week trip that was going to take us through Guadalajara, Guanajuato, San Miguel, and Mexico City. And we get to the Guadalajara airport, and Uncle Bud and myself, we all go to the rental car agency, and myself and Uncle Bud go in to get the vehicle. He thought he had reserved it in advance. It turns out that he never actually paid for it, so they didn't have our vehicle on hand, and the only thing they had, and we're doing this like he doesn't speak any Spanish. So the reason I'm in there is because I speak a bit of Spanish and was able to kind of facilitate the conversation a little bit. The only thing they had on site was this beat up old minivan. So we ended up getting this beat up old minivan, and we're driving it around Mexico with like a 3-year-old for 2 weeks. And at the end, like we didn't have any real issues with the car. It was just kind of funny driving it around because it looked ridiculous. And when we got it to Mexico City to the airport to return it, we had a situation where Uncle Bud had forgotten the documentation of the damage on the vehicle before we had rented it to prove that like we didn't do all of this stuff to the car. And so I had to take an Uber to the hotel to like get it and then come back to the car rental agency, which took like 2 hours because it's Mexico City. So by the time I got back, somebody had come and tried to rent the same minivan, and Bud had heard them say to this person that they couldn't rent them the van because it's being decommissioned and taken out of service.
What? Why? Just because it was a total POS?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a POS in that it didn't function. Like, it got us to where we needed to go. It was just like it had obviously been a rental van for a long, long, long time and been treated like complete crap.
Love that. So I don't know if you know this about me. I used to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
I did know that. You told me that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So typically rental cars don't have a very long life. In fact, Enterprise has a car sales department because after a car has been a rental car, they then sell them.
Right. And I've always wondered how that goes because I would never buy a used rental car.
I wouldn't recommend it because not only do customers drive them like they don't give a shit, we, the employees, we'd have fun in them because
like if you're going to get a car that you know for sure has not been, I mean the maintenance I'm sure has been done, but if you want to get a car that you will never know what's happened with your vehicle, buy a used rental car, right?
100%. And people just drive them like they don't care because they don't care.
It doesn't
Why
matter.
would you? And maintenance is a thing. I mean, it was called a loafer program. It's like lube, oil, tires, rotation, whatever. That didn't even make sense. But we had that program where we would get them serviced. However, you obviously prioritize your needs of the fleet. You're not going to miss out on a rental because like, oh, it's gone 3,001 miles, like time to get the oil changed. It's like, no, we're going to rent it again because we don't have any other cars available. So it's kind of funny. It's a whole nother world. Anyway, my story, I've been going down to Mexico. As you know, I'm taking Spanish lessons too, trying to get on your level. And I'm
not on that much of a level, just to be clear.
You're fluent. I heard it. You're fluent. And my Spanish teacher lives in La Paz in Baja California.
Yeah.
There's a very small airport there. It's difficult to fly into from western Colorado. So I've been flying into Cabo. And sometimes I've taken like a shuttle up from Cabo, did the Tim Wenger thing and didn't have a car in La Paz. But this last time, I wanted to do some exploring. I had a buddy coming later in the trip to meet me, so I needed a car. So I spent, a long time researching where to rent a car because when you rent,
know the inside game that's going on.
I know the inside game, and because when you rent a car in Mexico, a big thing is insurance because your personal insurance does not carry over into Mexico. And there's a Mexican law that you do need liability insurance, and some car rental companies will not let you rent without buying supplemental insurance. So, for example, right now, if anyone listening goes on to Expedia and searches Cabo, Mexico, you're going to see car rentals for like $6 a day, $9 a day. And the general rule in the car rental industry is the cheaper the car, the more hassle you'll get at the car rental place. If you research those companies that do $6 or $9 per day, you'll see reviews from customers that are like, yeah, I went to this place. They're usually off-site. So you're completely, you spend 20 minutes getting there on the shuttle bus, and then they just hold you hostage. Oh, you need the supplemental insurance. You need this. And no matter how much you argue with them, they're not going to let you go. So I spent a long time researching it, decided on one rental car company that wasn't the most expensive, but wasn't the cheapest, blah, blah, blah. In the past, when I've rented cars in Mexico, I'm used to the hassle when I return. For example, one time I rented a car in Cancun, and when I returned, the return area was on a hill. So your gas gauge would go down, and then they would tell you that the gas was low, and they would try and charge you for it. So there's all these like little scams that happen. And picking up the car went fine. I'm on my way back to Cabo from La Paz. It's about a 2-hour drive. I'm driving out of town, and before I left, I was aware that I knew I might get this hassle when I returned the car, and that there might be some damage they might try and find, because things I've read about this car rental company, I got the vibe. So before I left, I set up my wallet. I set up my wallet where I only had a certain amount of money showing in my wallet. I organized it a certain way, and I had a certain denomination of bills, and at this time, I had a mix of Mexican pesos and US dollars. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm just about to get out of La Paz. I'm in a little bit of traffic in the right-hand lane, following the car in front of me. On my left, I see this cop car coming up. He starts to pull up next to me, gets right alongside of me, is going to pass me. I see him turn his head, look to the right at me, turn his head back, and just slam on the brakes and drop back, pulls in right behind me, pulls me over. I'm like, oh man, here we go.
Yeah.
Shit. Pull over. He comes up to the window. Now, like you, I speak a little bit of Spanish, not fluent by any means. So this cop approaches and starts talking to me in Spanish, telling me all this stuff. And I understand a lot of what he's saying. And he says that back there in that intersection, you were speeding, and we actually have you speeding on a traffic camera. And so now I'm going to have to give you a ticket. I'm like, okay. So he asked for my license and everything, and I give it to him. And I don't know if you know this, but in Mexico, when you get a ticket, they take your license and they write you a ticket, and then they deliver both the license and the ticket to the police station. So you lose your license. Now you have to go back to the police station, pay the fine to get your license back. So he starts explaining this to me. I'm like, well, shit, I'm on the way to my flight. And luckily, because I left early, knowing that I might get hassled at the car rental spot and everything, so I had plenty of time. But I did make a mistake. He's like, where are you going? I said, oh, I'm going to Cabo. Oh, why are you going there? Are you flying out? Yes. Oh, okay. Well, I got to write you a ticket. It's going to be, I think originally he said it was going to be 1,200 pesos, which isn't that bad.
It's like $60.
Yeah, $50, $60. But he's like, you're going to have to go back to the police station in La Paz.
Is he telling you this in English?
Spanish. Yeah. I'm getting the gist of what he's saying. And he's saying, I have to go back. And I already knew that he was going to keep the license. I knew that about Mexico. And he's like, I'll probably be back there in a couple hours, so you can pick it up then. And he knows that I'm going to the airport. So he's already setting me up. So then he says, or if you want, you can just pay the fine here. I'm like, oh, well, how much is that? Oh, that's 4,000 pesos. So it's like $200.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, fuck. And I had $200, but I didn't want to pay it. And I really just have a thing. I mean, I don't know how you feel about bribing people in situations when you're traveling. It's a nasty feeling. All of me is saying, just tell them to go pound sand, take the ticket, go pay it. But calculating all this, I'm like, all right, well, I might miss my flight. And then who knows when he's actually going to get to the police station. I opened my wallet, and thank God I had it set up because I was anticipating this hassle at the car rental agency. Long story short, ended up getting out of there for $36.
Because he thought that's all you had.
It was, yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's all I showed him. That's all I presented to him. Now, I had just come from Hawaii. I had a guiding tour. I had like over $1,000 cash tips in the car. So if any of this had gone wrong, I was totally screwed. He was going to take everything I had. But first, I showed him a big bill, like a 500 peso bill. I was kind of playing into the idea that I understood some things but didn't understand everything. When he first told me, oh, you can pay here, and I just sort of gave him this look like I kind of understood, and I took out my wallet and I just gave him the 500. And he just laughed. He looked at me. He's like, no. And so, dude, I just sort of acted. I just started pulling bills out of my wallet one at a time, being like, this okay? And I finished all the Mexican pesos, and then every time I would hand him a bill, he would talk on the walkie-talkie, and it was kind of fake. He was acting like he was talking to another officer and being like, oh, okay, he has X amount of pesos now, acting like he's relaying it, and then he would report back to me like, no, not more. And so just bill by bill we went. And then at the end of the pesos, I had put 3 $1 bills in there. And that was like my last act. And so I just took out the 3 $1 bills, like showed him my wallet was empty. I was just gave him this like shrug shoulder look like, oh, I don't know, man, just what about this? And basically sort of got the idea that this was all that I had. I'm like, that's it. And he took it. So he asked for $200 and he got $36. But had I not set up the wallet for this,
that's crazy. That's a good tip. That's probably the greatest takeaway of this whole conversation.
I would have been in huge trouble, dude. Huge trouble. Even just like, it's not like I would have had all that cash from the tips like in my wallet, but I definitely had more than $36 in there to start. And the whole thing was from paranoia, which turned out to be true because I figured, all right, when I get to the car rental place, I know they're probably going to hassle me for some damage. And, I had pictures of the car, but a lot of times when you return the car, especially if they know you're flying out, they'll hold you hostage and they'll make you nervous because people will arrive an hour before their flight and be like, I got to drop the car real quick. And they're like, no, there's damage. Oh, well, you can pay $100 or you just go, or you can miss your flight. What do you want to do? That's like my biggest tips when you're doing that stuff.
Well, the real question is did that happen to you? Did they give you a hard time at the car rental place?
They didn't. After all that, they didn't. No. The flow of the universe came back to me where I felt like they handed me that. I had no problem with the car. But, this is why you need to be prepared to these situations. Like, always give yourself plenty of time when you're returning your car or driving a long distance in a country, and set up your wallet so that if you have to bribe someone, you can offer them, you can play a role, play a story, and maybe get away with less money than they originally asked for. But it was wild, man. Have you ever had to bribe a police officer in Mexico?
No, I haven't. But, I'm glad we had this conversation because now I will be more careful about setting up my wallet. I'm always good about leaving myself plenty of time. I'm good about not like just having my wallet hanging out in my back pocket or whatever. Like I'm pretty good with like the safety stuff. But I don't know that I've ever generally like set up my wallet in case I have to bribe somebody. That's an interesting thing that I've never really thought about. Like I've done the thing where I like hide money in my sock or whatever if I think I'm going somewhere sketch. But I've never done it thinking that I might have to like bribe a cop.
It's a good idea, mate.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
It's not even for cops. It's for anywhere that can just hold you hostage.
Yeah.
So recommend that tip. Mexico, I've not been bribed or ripped off anywhere but Mexico, which is sad to say because I love Mexico. Yeah. I absolutely love it. I remember this one time I was at this conference I'm going to this weekend. It's in Oaxaca. previously, it always moves around destinations, and we were in Chiapas. We're driving on this mountain road in the middle of nowhere. It's a 15-passenger van, and it's filled, and I'm in the middle seat, like in the middle of the van, so I can see right out the front of the van. And I'm looking, and we're coming up on this village, and I just see this crowd of people, and then there's this rope across the road. People on either side of the road are holding the rope, and in the middle is just a big stop sign. We're probably going 50, 60 miles an hour on this country road. And as we approach the village, the guy is not slowing down, not slowing down, not slowing down. I start to get like a little concerned. I'm like, well, what's going on? We plow through the rope and through the stop sign. The sign hits the front of the van, smacks up against the windshield. Thank God it didn't break. Bounces up over the van. The people on the side of the road shriek in horror and scream. And everyone in the van freaks out, starts yelling.
Yeah.
What the fuck, dude? What are you doing? You almost just killed someone. And then the guide turns around. He's like, hey, guys, listen. No, like, this is a scam in Mexico. If you're driving in the middle of nowhere, these villages will set up a blockade. And typically it's foreigners who are driving through will stop. And then just everyone surrounds your car. And they'll start asking you for things, and just you're stuck. You're in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere to go. That same trip up ahead, after he told us that, we come to a toll booth. I don't know if you know this, but like the Mexican government obviously controls like all the tolls from the interstates. That money is supposed to be kicked back to the local areas, but oftentimes it doesn't get kicked back. So now what villagers will do is they'll actually take over the toll booth. They'll go and tell the toll booth agent to scram, and they'll just stand out there and collect the toll themselves. So after almost plowing through this village of people, we get to the interstate, and there's a guy with a potato sack over his head. I'm not making this up. A potato sack over his head with the eyes slit out, holding a machete across his chest. He's the bad cop. And then there's a short little, friendly-looking, well-dressed guy standing next to him. The van pulls up. They're outside the toll booth. He looks in. He counts. He says something to the driver I can't quite hear. The driver gives him money. We start to drive away. He puts his hand in the window. Not enough. Gives him more money, and then he lets us go. And the whole time, the guy with the potato sack and the machete is just eyeballing all of us.
Yeah, that's funny. Like the thing with the highways in Mexico that I didn't know until we did this 2-week road trip is that there are effectively 2 highway systems in Mexico. There are the roads that connect the towns that anyone can drive on, and there's no tolls. And then there are the highways where there are tolls. And you actually want to be, if you're in rural areas in central Mexico where there's, you're nowhere near a tourist center, it's just, central Mexico, you want to be on the toll roads because there aren't you're far less likely to have a situation than if you're literally the other road is right over here. You can see it the whole time between like Guadalajara and Guanajuato. They're adjacent to each other. One is a toll road, one is not. And as a traveler, you want to be in the toll road because even though you're going to have to pay tolls like 3 or 4 times on your drive, it's safe. Not that the other road is guaranteed to have something happen, but it's a less likely chance. Like you're not going to see that barricade on this toll booth highway.
It's wild. You've never been ripped off or bribed or have to?
Certainly not like by that in that situation. I've been ripped off by like people. Like I know I've been in situations abroad where I've been at a restaurant and they've shortchanged me or whatever, or like at a shop or like a counter at like whatever, the airport or whatever, where I know I've been shortchanged, but it's like $7 and I'm like, am I going to stand here and frickin' argue with the dude, or am I just going to take my boss and go? That has happened to me multiple times.
Well, that's the dilemma I felt with the bribe of the cop, because for the next traveler, I want to say no, right? I want to tell this cop to go pound sand. Yeah, give me the ticket. I'll go back and pay it, whatever.
But it would have ended up possibly costing you more than $36 and a bunch of your time.
It definitely would have cost me more than $36.
Like, honestly, I feel like you probably played that as well as it could have been played.
Well, it worked out, luckily. It could have been a lot worse. But you know what I'm saying? Like, for these people, when you get ripped off or you get bribed, you want to be a part of the change and try and stop it from happening. Because when you pay, obviously, you just feed into it.
But what are you going to do about it?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, argue with the guy. Make it so next time he goes to try and rip someone off, the guy at the counter, he's going to be like, well, the last guy tried to do this too. Like, gave me hell for 15 minutes. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess what I've come down to in those like minor situations like that is I'm like, this dude definitely needs $7 more than I need $7.
Yeah, but that's not the right way to go.
I know that's not the right way to think about it, but that's in the moment. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, you know what? Who cares?
All right. Well, $7 is $7.
Yeah,
it's tough. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming by. I hope you enjoy your trip to Denver. I read this about you today. Maybe you can close on this. I know you're an early airport guy. So you said your flight's at 5:30 tomorrow?
Yeah.
So you're going to get there at 3:30?
No, honestly, it's Grand Junction. I'll probably get there at like 4:45. But generally, yeah, I am an early airport arriver.
Okay. You don't need a ride to the airport, do you?
Unless you're driving.
Oh. I was hoping you already had a ride. We'll see.
No, I can take an Uber. It's all good.
Quote from you. Among the aspects of travel that changed for me in my late 30s was a sudden desire to not look like a slob even on long travel days. So tell us, did you look like a slob before, and what do you wear now when you're traveling?
Yeah, so that's fine. I can't remember where I said that, but it originated from when I went to Kyrgyzstan a couple of years ago. I had this situation in the airport in Chicago where I was trying to get to the international terminal, and I couldn't figure out how to get there. And so I'm like standing there looking at the sign of all the flights and directions or whatever. And there was this woman standing next to me who's like same age probably, she's in her 30s, standing next to me looking at the sign trying to figure it out. And she's also lost. So I started talking to her. It turns out that she was from Sweden, but she lives in Malmo. So she's flying to Copenhagen and then is just going to go across to Malmo. And she was so well put together, and I looked like a Colorado dude, and I'm like, we're talking and we're like, same situation, like we both have a young kid, we're both traveling for work a lot and are in like a similar vibe in our lives, same place in our lives, but she was like she looked so good and was so well put together that the whole time I was talking to her, I was like, she probably thinks that I'm lying because I'm wearing like a hoodie and like a sloppy hat or whatever. And so then the whole time on this long haul flight overseas, I'm like, man, as soon as I get home from this trip, I am going to buy a better wardrobe for myself so that doesn't happen again. So yeah, I've slowly been figuring it out. And I'm not like a guy that knows about fashion. I just take cues from people that I see. So in that way, like traveling for work a lot has benefited me because I see what other journalists are wearing or whatever when they're in professional settings. And I'm like, okay, like I'm going to take a picture of that guy so that I can go home and like figure out how to dress like that on the internet, So that's what I've done. And I'm sure it's very obvious that I'm from Colorado, but it's better than it used to be.
So what are you going to wear tomorrow? I read something about the boots in this article.
Yeah. No, I have a nice pair of Thursday boots that I've had for a year or two, and I really like them. I wear them anytime I'm doing anything professional.
Is Thursday a day of the week?
It's a boot company.
Okay.
So they look nice. They're comfortable. Whatever. They don't kill my feet. And then I'll wear like a nice button-down shirt and like a clean pair of pants like this. So it's not over the top. I mean, it's like. I'm not a politics reporter. I'm reporting on freaking outdoor industry sustainability. So it's not like I need to go that far. I just don't want to be the worst dressed person in the room.
Well, if you're traveling with me, buddy, you never will be. I can promise you that. Have you noticed how people treat you differently?
You know what? I feel like I want to say yes. I wouldn't say that my life has changed because of it, but I at least feel better about myself.
There's a saying, when you look good, you feel good.
That's right.
I hope that carries on for you. Tim, thanks so much for coming by, man.
Hey, thanks,
Come on
buddy.
anytime, dude. Hope you enjoy your travels. Looking forward to your more reports. How can people follow your travels and your stories?
Yeah, timwenger.net is my portfolio website. You can see some work there and get in touch with me through that site if you want. I'm on Instagram at timwenger1.
And most of your work appearing on Matador Network at this time?
Yeah, Matador Network, primary place for work. So yeah, if you go to Matador or search Tim Wenger Matador Network, you'll find me.
And you also just wrote the guidebook to Colorado?
For Foeders, yeah. So I've done a lot of guidebook writing for Foeders. I've done the last, I think, 4 editions now of the Colorado guidebook, several chapters of that. And then I recently did a couple chapters of the National Parks of the West book that should publish in print here in the next couple of months, I hope.
Thanks for sharing your expertise. See you next time.
Yep.
All right, buddy. See ya. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, you may enjoy the previous episode, The Transformation of St. Pete with Jason Latimer. You also may enjoy our next episode. We are going to head down to Mexico, to the state of Oaxaca. We'll explore what the city's like and also talk about some of the options for adventure in the nearby mountains, some village-to-village hikes, and some cultural experiences you can have. Until next time, you can find me online at Wake and Wander Will. See you next week.
Whole wide world. Yes, now I'm riding the terrain, flying high up once again. Got my crew sitting healthy and my boo living wealthy. Level 99, never settle in my mind. So I pedal and I climb up the pedestal and find almighty weapon. So I calm, lightly step into the castle. Satchel, tackled, wrestled down the corridor where I'm grounded through the floor. Roundhouse into my core, down, out, and through the door. Sword down at my side, I gotta round up and ride. Face boss, break jaws till I take off. Face off, stop and swing my serious strike. This is it, take the title, disappear in the night. To the whole wide world. Got the keys to the kingdom overseas with the wisdom guarantee that my rhythm hit the whole wide world. Slay the boss in the castle when we cross final battle. Then I walk out, travel to the whole wide world. Got the keys to the kingdom overseas with the wisdom guarantee that my rhythm hit the whole wide world. Slay the boss in the castle.